Alright, so I've got my references here, but I'll chuck the main reference on the canvas to help with achieving accuracy with the drawing. This is something that's helpful, especially if you're new and have trouble getting those proportions accurately. And in a separate video, I can outline my sketching process, but here I'll just focus on the rendering. So this process starts off with me finding that local color, and then I'll get a multiply layer and just try and find that side of the face with the shadow. And after I do that, I'm going to add some color variation. So I'm going to actually look at the colors in the reference and try and add them. And I'll add colors that are darker, so they're less bright and more saturated, and their hue is more to the red. Those are what the shadows are. This is called color shifting. I'll also add some saturated red to the cheeks. This is called subsurface scattering. And I will also add brighter, less saturated, cooler colors for the light, and I'll just block all those in immediately without wasting any time. I find this is the most efficient method to just quickly get as much information on the canvas as possible. You can see me blocking in the shape of the hair now as well, and the clothing. So I'm just using basic colors. I'm trying to find the local color and trying to see now how all these colors that I've put on the canvas interact with each other, and making sure that they all are accurate essentially. And at this stage, now that I've got all my local colors down and I've got a bit of color variation, I can start sculpting in the shadows a little bit. So I'll even add in some color variation as I'm doing this. So you can see I added some red and orange to the bottom right, just to boost the colors already, because I want to start from a base that's very vibrant and has a lot of color, as opposed to having to bake that in after. I want to have that ready and already implemented before. So that just makes the process easier moving forward. So you can see me now blocking in some of the shadow, and you'll see later on, and maybe I've done this previously, I'll switch the canvas to black and white. You can just do this as a shortcut if you're on Photoshop. This helps you check if your values are accurate. So you can see me here blocking in basic shapes of shadow by literally, as I said before, I grab darker, more saturated, more red color than the local color, and I'll just put that basic shape in, and then I'll supplement that with my lighter color, which is the opposite of that color shifting, and I'll ensure that it pretty much matches the basic shape of the shadow and light in the reference. Alt click, I'm picking the color of the local color and I'm pushing it into that lighter color to create these shapes of light and dark, and then I'll get smaller brush strokes and just push them in and put them randomly, so to mimic that texture of hair. And I'll keep doing this, but on a smaller and smaller scale, to really render in some good details immediately, really. This is only taking me like less than 15 minutes, and I've already got a very strong base for the hair. It's this process being repeated. I'm adding some color variation, blocking in shadow and light, mixing it in a little bit, adding more color variation, and then I'm just continuing to do that on a smaller and smaller scale until it looks more believable and realistic. And I'm still trying to keep that stylized essence to it as well at the same time. So now that I've blocked in basically everything for the hair, I'm going to move on to doing the face. And when I block in some basic shadow for the face, I'm going to just, less dark, more saturated, more to the red. And you can already see that multiply shadow shape that I put in earlier already looks super light relative to everything else, because I've already rendered out the hair pretty nicely. So you can see me now, I need to really add some darker value on that face to make it match with everything else. So that's exactly what I'm doing right here. I'm being conscious of the planes, getting those little plane shifts below the nose and on top of the lip and between the eyebrows and the eye. I'm trying to really just imagine those planes and how they all interact with each other. And you can see me, I'm just doing the same thing with the light now. So I've blocked in some basic shadow, I'm gonna block in some basic light. And you can see me also alt clicking and just looking at the colors on the reference. If you're not sure what color to pick, just look at the reference and get an idea for how the colors shift from light to dark, and just analyze that and see how you can implement that into your own paint. So this is something that's really helpful if you're new to using color. Maybe you've been practicing in black and white for a while and you need to introduce color into your system. This is a great way to start doing that. So I'm just blocking in where I see that light, and I'm just blending everything in and trying to make it look more seamless. But now is not the time for blending as well, so I'm just trying to block it in, but I'll blend it a little bit just to keep everything looking more organized. You can see me here adding some color variation. So I've already added color variation earlier in the painting, and during my shadow blocking I add even more color variation, and I just do that because I like boosting the colors and just even adding new colors that aren't even in the reference, just as a stylistic choice. I saw some yellow in the original reference and I decided to just over exaggerate that, and I even added a bit of purple under the chin in the neck area that's not present in the reference, and I still decided to add a little bit of that, and that helps, especially when we see the yellow there as well. So the yellow and purple are nice colors that work well together. So now I'm blocking in. Actually, now I'm using a textured mixer brush just to do the hair a little bit and just to like give it a more lifelike quality. So I'm like pushing it in different angles around to sort of simplify those hair strands and just make it look a little bit more interesting. Now at this stage I'm doing all the smaller details, so you can see me starting to paint in the eye just on a new layer. Notice for this whole process I've used one layer and locked it, and that's pretty much something I'll always do. But when I'm trying to add something on top of that might, that I might mess up, I'll just put it in a new layer, like the eyes here. I add that white, and then I'm thinking of the planes always and adding the eyelashes in that manner, following the form of the eyeball. And then you can see the eye wrapping around the form. So I sort of mimic that with the eyelashes, how they curve around. And I'm just painting in the shadow under the eye a little bit. And I'm zooming in here because I need to get a closer look at those details. So you can see me I'm repeating the same stuff here. And I'm really just doing the same thing for the other eye. So eyelashes going around, following the form. And I'll paint in the irises and all of that stuff as well, and I'm just trying to keep the planes in my head and make sure that I'm giving a sense of three-dimensionality while also simplifying the shapes and colors a little bit, just to create that stylized look. The same process happens with the lips, adding the local color there. Then I'm adding a darker value to separate the top and bottom lip and to also create more form on the bottom lip. I'm trying to get that shadow on the right side of the lip, like how I earlier tried to identify the shadow of the face early on. And then I'm doing the same thing with the light, blocking in shadow, blocking in light, trying to add a bit more saturation to the lips by just glazing in a stronger, more saturated red color. But pretty much I'm just trying to display those basic shadow and light on the form and make it fit onto the face as if, it's not a sticker. I'm trying to think of that. It's a 3/4 view, trying to create that three-dimensionality by having all my brush strokes wrap around the form. So now I actually have to paint the clothing. So you can see how I've sort of rendered out the face, not fully, it's not done completely, but the main elements are there, and now I feel like I just really need to get to the other half of the painting. I've done first half, need to finish the second half, then we can add those special effects. So when I'm looking at doing clothing, I'm using a textured brush. You might notice that throughout the first half of this painting, I was using a round brush, just a basic round brush. Now I'm bringing in some texture. It doesn't really matter what brush you use, as long as it has some texture to it. That'll help create a more interesting look when you're rendering or when you're painting in clothing. So exact same process as doing the face. I'm blocking in the shadow and light and using that alt-click method to push those shadow and light colors together to create some variation. You can even see me switching the canvas to black and white and adding in some color variation and some deeper, stronger shadow. So it's really more of the same stuff here. And I'm looking at the reference, it's right next to me as I'm doing this, and I'm just thinking, where is that shadow and how can I properly represent it in my painting? A really useful thing you can do is you can also grab your lasso tool and carve out the shape that you want to use. And you can see me doing that with my lighter color opposed to my local color. And then I grab a round mixer brush that sort of breaks the monotony of all that texture So I'm using that to sort of blend some of the edges that I see are very smooth in the reference. So as always, we're working from big to small. You saw how earlier in this process I was using big shapes to sort of break down the main elements of the clothing. Now I'm sort of looking at the smaller creases and all the smaller shapes that'll just tie everything together and make it look more believable. You can also see I decided to whip out the liquefy tool just to sort of fix up some of the structural errors or some inconsistencies that I see when I look at my reference and I look at my own drawing. And this is something that you can do just to quickly fix up some of the proportions without destroying all the rendering that you've already done. So now I'm at the stage where I've really rendered out a lot of everything. So I've done the face, I've done the clothing, and now I'm getting a mixer brush and I'm coming back to that. And I'm just gonna use it to sort of create a bit of texture in the piece and blend some things up that look a little bit too rough, or they look like the remnants of the earlier part of the painting is still there, like the blockiness. So I want to smooth it out and just give it a more painterly feel. So I'll use a mixer brush with some texture and it'll just push everything into each other. I'm also finalizing my thoughts on all the planes. So I added a bit of a white highlight to the nose, and I lit up the left side of the nose just to show off that side of the nose, that plane of it, so to make the whole thing look a little bit more 3D. And you can see I did the same thing by adding a highlight where the cheekbones are, and that's also present in the reference as well. If you look at it, I unfortunately forgot to record some of the parts where I do my special effects, but pretty much all I did was I added some blur to the piece, some noise, and some chromatic aberration, just to give it some texture and to make it look a little more interesting. So this last part just consists of me doing some random stuff to touch up the piece. So I'm just cleaning some things up here and there, and it's not really that necessary. The bulk of the work has already been done, so I could call it quits right now, but you know, gotta add my final touches. And this is what the finished painting looks like. I hope you got some value from this and the things I shared in this video helped you out.